Hey folks, I'd like to try something I haven't done before. This is everything that I painted last year. So I paint a lot of board game components, a lot of miniatures and things like that. And I've done a few painted reviews where I do a review not only of the gameplay and how that works, but also talk a little bit about painting the miniatures. So a lot of these things, or to some percentage of these things you may have seen before, if that's one of the videos that you found me on. As I paint things throughout the year, I like to document them. I usually put them in an album on Facebook or something like that. And it just it's a handy kind of reminder of like everything that you've worked on. And just a way to kind of keep track of all this stuff. I painted through a few games, a lot of core sets last year, and I'm anxious to show you all the stuff I worked on. So without further ado, let's move on to my photo album here. All right, so I started the year with Townsfolk Tussle, and I guess we're looking at the Froggy Milkman. Townsfolk Tussle was kind of an interesting project. There were a lot of things to paint. I was still using contrast paints and messing around with the speed paints. I believe had just come out. I don't think I'd gotten to the speed paints at this point. I was still using contrast, a mix of contrast and acrylic paints. And I found the contrast paints were really difficult to use on this particular set of characters, just because they had a lot of open surface and stuff. So it might be easier to paint these in a more traditional way. But I did have a lot of fun painting these. I thought that they came out overall, I thought they came out really good, and boy, are they a lot of fun to play fully painted. So I'm really happy with these. Of course, I did the Townsfolk Tussle didn't include any sort of expansions or anything. I believe they do have one coming up very soon, but they didn't have any expansions for this. So, but they did have quite a lot of characters. And every character was represented as a miniature. All these big ones that we've seen have been ruffians, and now we're getting into, I guess, the heroes of Townsfolk Tussle, and that would be the townsfolk themselves. And all of them are very, very colorful characters, really unusual, a lot of little nuanced darkness in these kind of humorous little characters. Townsfolk Tussle is a boss battling game, and I guess it's got that same aesthetic as the old cartoons, old animated cartoons and stuff. And yeah, it was a lot of fun to paint. There's the whole insert with all the stuff painted and done. This also came with standees, so you could use standees if you wanted to. Something else I messed with this year is the Pulp Alley set of miniatures. I do some miniatures for Pulp Alley quite a lot. I bought a couple of starter sets and decided to paint those up. I've also got some terrain. This was a terrain project that I worked on with making some trees and tree stands. These were mounted on an old DVD that I got with a Pizza Hut box a long time ago, back when people watched DVDs. Sorry, honey, I'm in Vegas. You had other plans. This is from Solomon Kane. I got all of the Solomon Kane expansions this year. I actually painted only one because it only had 3 characters in it, so I grabbed it up, and it's one of the very few books I've read of Solomon Kane. So yeah, I painted this expansion up, and then I kind of put it aside. I'm going to pick Solomon Kane up at this point, some point this year, and finish it up. As we go on to Nemesis, this is Nemesis Lockdown, the latest version. So I got that this year. This is the Queen, I believe, and then her little breeders. We have like the next level, these smaller full-size adult ones. No, those are babies. And these are the adults. Now, I painted these with speed paints, I believe, as I've just gotten in some speed paints. I always end up mixing up the contrast paints and the speed paints. Like I'll mix, I'll use a little bit from here and there just to give me a really wide color palette range. But I tried to paint as much of this with speed paints as I could, just to kind of really give them a thorough, examination. I never got to the point where I felt like I could review it. Like I couldn't tell a lot of differences between the two. There are issues with both of those paints, and kind of a special technique that you need to use. But boy, contrast paints or speed paints on the Nemesis stuff, and you will knock it out super fast. Of course, this is one of the exclusive ones from the original game that I got when it was reprinted, because I didn't get it the first time. I really like the characters. I like the characters, I think, in this version of the game a little bit better than the others. Especially like the janitor here with his power washer as a weapon. I think that's pretty funny. And it's pretty neat. I painted Nemesis, it felt like in about 2 weeks with the contrast paints. It went really, really super quick. And again, my paint jobs are not, they're not the kind of things I'm not going to be working for Games Workshop anytime soon, painting these things. But I do get them table ready, and I think they're maybe a little bit better than table ready. I try to do a really good job and make it a quality component, Also painted the expansions. This is the expansion for that set. And I went back and painted the Carnomorphs, which were the only thing I didn't paint out of the first set of Nemesis expansions. And this is just another especially gross set of aliens that you can fight. In Nemesis, you can swap out the different aliens that you fight with. And these were the ones I never got to the first time around when I went to paint. Now we're on to the Faceless. Now this is a really strange game with a magnet. And it might be kind of hard to see, but there's right there at the base, you can kind of see a little dimple there, and inside of that base is a magnet, and you can use that to manipulate this compass that's on the board. And that compass is your player, and you'll be moving the player around. This is a game that I don't hear many people talk about. It doesn't really come up a whole lot, but I did do a painted review of it, and if you'd like to know more, feel free to check it out. All of these little pieces had kind of two sides to it. So you got like the little girl, then on the other side of the mirror comes this kind of ghost world creature version of the child. So yeah, these were a lot of fun. I don't usually paint. I don't go in for chibi art. The little big head on a small body, cartoony art. I don't usually do that. These were the 3D tokens that replace the regular tokens on the game. Yeah, I don't usually go for this type of art, but it was a lot of fun to do this particular game. So this is Zombicide. This is an example of something I just kind of wanted to try. And that's using the contrast paints as just a simple wash, where I just kind of picked one color and I color coded the components. And this is Travel Zombicide. If you didn't know, I've got one of the very few unboxings and playthrough, and I think probably the only playthrough on the internet of Travel Zombicide, a very, very tiny version of it. And because it was so tiny, I didn't bother to paint these really, but I did color code them to make the details a little bit easier to see, because it does have a little bit of detail in there. I also built a number of wooden buildings, these laser cut wooden buildings, and they're in here too. These especially were assembled and primed. I've yet to use them in a game or anything. There's a little toilet. But, I love building these little wooden buildings and stuff. This is a little, I think it's 153 scale truck that I got for Pulp Alley terrain, both terrain and possibly objectives and stuff. But a little 1930s pickup truck. Now we're into Ankh. Ankh was probably my probably the coolest stuff that I painted last year. Definitely the nicest looking uh, of the board games that I painted out. I painted the whole core set and everything from the Kickstarter. Um, there's a video for that, so you can see some of these in a little bit more detail. I definitely had a great time painting this set. This was a lot of fun to do. Uh, Again, mostly speed paints on these. This is where I'd got the full speed paint set at this point. Before I just got the starter set that was kind of small. At this point, I've got the full speed paint set, and I try to use as many colors from there as possible. Of course, though, I did also mix in, standard acrylic paints, especially for things like the base, where I wanted to get a real consistent tone all the way around. Overall, a really fun project. And kind of the downside of painting whole box sets like this is you kind of get burned out on the game by the time you get finished with it. It can be kind of difficult, especially like you finish it and you kind of want to put it down and never look at it again. It's funny because I mean these Simon games are so overstuffed with so many miniatures. Really, a lot more miniatures than you're really going to need for the game. But that's part of why we hate it. That's part of why we love it. But boy, if you can get them all painted, it makes the game quite different for me. I mean, Ankh, especially 2-player, is already a really good game. But painted a 2-player, I feel like it really shines. And I think this might be this guy might be my favorite guy I've painted all of last year. Sobek, I believe, yeah. And and we're just up to May at this point, so that's interesting. Sobek. There, of course, there are lots of guardians and Ankh. Got some mummy cats. I don't remember the names of all of them. Regular mummies or pharaoh mummies, I think. Giant scorpions. What's this guy? Apep. It's funny when you look at some of the people that talk about the creation of this. A lot of things weren't. I guess I think they do the best they can with research for all these different creatures, but in the end, they're like, well, we need X amount of guardians. So some of the concepts on this, were not exactly clear in terms of what exactly these things looked like, and you can tell they took a little bit of creative license if you go back and look historically at what some of the ways these were represented in some ways. But I guess that's probably true with a lot of things. This was a really, really big creature that you got. I believe I want to say that's a Kickstarter extra guy, but it's like a giant alligator monster thing with mummies just literally tied to it all over it and driving it on top and everything else. There's some kind of rabbit guardians. Some ghosty looking guys. These remind me a lot of Moon Knight and the characters in Moon Knight a little bit. We got these scorpion looking dudes, some snake looking dudes, these bird guys with a strange blue face. I tried to paint pretty close to the art as I could, and you can't tell too much, but there's I added a texture, did the Games Workshop texture to the base, so it should, and you can't see it too well, especially on these smaller ones, but the bases are sort of the crackled desert color. It didn't end up matching the the desert too well on the game board, but I thought it looked pretty good individually. So, got some scarabs. I have no idea what this is. Bess, and does not look Egyptian to me. Looks a little bit like Z Garcia though. All right, got some monkeys, some cranes. What are these? Griffins. And Duarte, another character that showed up in in Moon Knight. If you watched the Moon Knight series, I really liked that. That came out around the time that I was working on this, so it was kind of a good inspiration. And of course, this had a camel caravan, so these are little teeny tiny camels, and they had a lot of detail. I think there's like 5 or 6 different ones, and I went through them. I painted a lot of this. Now we're getting into some odd characters. I've got this guy in the banana suit. These are folks that I got them from Hassle Free Miniatures, a website called Hassle Free Miniatures, and I guess I got them to play, skirmish games like Pulp Alley and stuff like that. But sometimes I'll get stuff just to paint, and this guy in the banana suit seemed pretty fun. I also got some animals to kind of mix in with my different characters. I made all those bases. I got some hole punches, and I've been punching holes in old blister packs and stuff to make these bases myself. I love the clear bases because whatever terrain you lay them on, it looks like they're supposed to be there. So you don't get that contrast from them having a different thing on their base versus versus where you're putting them on the table. This is one of the very few 30 millimeter farm animal model kits that I've seen, or 28 millimeter, I guess. They're made to be kind of in scale for a lot of the standard Dungeons and Dragons figures and stuff like that, but it was a pain in the ass to put together. Really, really painful building these things. Not a great kit. A friend of mine, Chattanooga Ed, gave me this miniature for Christmas. This was the last miniature that I painted for Cthulhu Death May Die, and she came out great. So I painted her basically silver, and then I went over it with a blue contrast paint that gave it that kind of shimmery metal effect on the dress. This is another Etsy wooden house model that I really liked a lot. And it would have been all wood, like it would have been the color of the porch there. That the whole building was the color of that porch there. I did actually paint, and I painted it, and then I assembled it, which was kind of a different thing too. I painted all those building panels, the colors that you see there, and then I assembled it together, and it's pretty nice way to handle that. Here's another kind of a shack that I got. I started painting a bunch of stuff, and I decided like the swamp, it turned everything gray. I have a tavern over here. It kind of is all this gray color, so that was my inspiration to kind of make a whole town like that. And I bought a couple of these things on Etsy to put together. That's another building from that series. Oh, I think this might be a different set of buildings because this other one's a little bit more. This is a little bit more wacky looking, and this is a kind of a more standard looking building. But they went together in a very similar way. I'll say that. So I got in these clear acrylic bases. And I thought it would be fun to kind of make some more tree stands. And I had I had a bunch of old Games Workshop jungle trees and barrels and other things. And I had this other set of palm trees that I actually painted last year. And so I decided to sort of mix them together and add them to these bases. And I came up with some really interesting little palm bases on these clear things, so I can just kind of toss these out. The upside is like wherever you put them, of course it looks like they're there because the bases are clear and your eyes just kind of forget that there's a base there, but it is a little bit shiny and reflective, especially under studio lights and stuff when I'm filming. So I don't know, it's not the perfect solution, but it is pretty neat. And those acrylic discs are fairly cheap. I got inspired by Dave, the guy at Pulp Alley, uses old CDs and stuff, like I think old DVR CDs or maybe old music CDs that are trash or something like that, messed up compact discs. And you can certainly do that, but these clear bases were really inexpensive. I got a whole bunch on, I think on Amazon. and they're almost the same size as a CD, and you can kind of do that clear base thing. So I thought that was fun. I made a lot of objectives and a whole bunch of other things. Here we have another kind of crazy miniature from Hassle-Free Miniatures. Got this little girl with her Molotov cocktail and her torch. We have a steampunk lady. This is something that I think my mother had gotten me for Christmas. No, for my birthday I'd gotten this thing. More random characters from the Hassle-Free Miniatures line. This is the Shadow, or so I think he was actually named something else, but it obviously kind of looks a lot like the Shadow. This is the Raven Squadron. This is a character from Pulp Alley, or Pulp Figures, which makes kind of works in conjunction with Pulp Alley to make these miniatures that go with their game really well. And this is a Raven Squadron. This is another single character that I got from the Pulp Figures line. This is from Hassle-Free Miniatures, little sword girl, and an alligator. I think this was one of those little packs of Ralpartha things, those D&D Ralpartha things. Some more Pulp Figures characters. Don't remember this. I painted this for Pulp Alley. I don't remember who the original manufacturer was for these, but they got some little Eastern fellows. All right, so these guys I've actually had sitting in my drawers or my to-do list drawers for quite a while. I believe they're from the 80s. they're old Ralpartha ninjas and a Ronin character, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, they sat around for a long time. I decided to paint them up this year. Just pull them out of an old box and paint them up. It was very satisfying to finally get that done, actually. Oh yeah, there we go. 1984. Here we have another building that I built. This is the last of this Mexican village. I bought the whole line of these foreground buildings. These are like the nicer ones, or the foreground buildings, and they come pre-painted and stuff, and you just kind of assemble them. And this is like a barn or something like that. I actually bought the whole line, everything except for like a courtyard or something that came with those. So I have a little Mexican village that I could put together. And a bear, of course, because you might need a bear for something. And a camel, because you might need a camel for something. I realized I didn't really have a lot of random animals and creatures and stuff to encounter in places, and so I picked out a couple of different things. Here's another foreground building, and this is like a Russian cabin, and I believe this came with two of them. Yep, and here's the other Russian cabin. Really interesting little models. These are hovels. This is a foreground kit, and they're hovels. So the company Foreground, they announced it at some point in the year that they were going out of business or something like that. I think someone else picked up that business, but because of that, I bought as many of the kits as I could, and built a lot of them. I also, while I was at it, I bought a lot of these Etsy versions. So this is another one from Etsy. They come in just plain wood. They are not pre-painted at all. I painted all of these in advance and then assembled them, just kind of like I described on the old one. And they all come apart, so you can play skirmish games and go on each level of that. I also did a Russian church. I think this is, of the buildings that I built last year, this is probably my favorite building. And we got some little Russian houses. I think there's two of those. Yeah, really interesting colors on that. These are all foreground models. And we've got the Phantom with a little bit of hair there on his shoulder. I probably ought to retake that picture. Not my favorite miniature I painted. Now we're getting into the Marvel Zombies. So Marvel Zombies released they released kind of this light version of it with just a few heroes and a few zombie heroes and a bunch of standees for zombies and stuff. It's like $35, but it's Zombicide. I played it and it's actually quite fun. The miniatures were a lot of fun to paint. Again, this is a lot of speed paints, a lot of contrast paints, and they took those paints really well. It was a real pleasure. I think the Hulk I kind of messed up, and I went back to more traditional techniques with the Hulk there, but yeah, the rest of them are pretty much all contrast paints. Yeah, the Vision probably he's probably the worst one as far as my critique of my paint jobs for all that stuff. But yeah, I really enjoy painting these characters. What a cool set of miniatures they were. I had trouble making my zombie heroes kind of look like they were actual zombies. I didn't feel like they looked kind of dead enough, and maybe I probably could have done more with the colors. They ended up just kind of looking like dirty versions of the heroes for the most part, but maybe when I get the full set of Marvel Zombies Zombicide, then I can experiment a little bit more. There's Cap. Alright, now we're into D.E.I. Now these are, I want you to bear in mind, these are 10 millimeter miniatures. Or maybe less, maybe 8 millimeter. They are very small. Literally fit right there on the end of your finger. But they were very detailed. Ludus Magnus Studios put this together. They have a version of this game that you can get with meeples, like all wooden things. And I think that's going to be the easier version of this to get, because I believe the miniature version was kind of a Kickstarter only. I do have a playthrough on my channel. I'm working on a painted review, although I painted the entire core box and the Kickstarter extras box that you get. I have not painted all of it, so I'm going to paint all the expansions and everything else, and then we'll probably get a painted review of that. But I do have a playthrough of it. I've got an unboxing where I show you all the stuff that I got initially. I ended up getting that last core box that I didn't have in the end, so I'll have a little bit more to talk about when I finally get to it. But yeah, this is most of the stuff for D.E.I. All the core box. This is one of the mercenaries that you can get. That was an extra thing you could get. I really loved these wilds, this wolf clan and stuff. This lady and her dog, and like all of her wolves, I guess, are her workers. And she's got this big armored polar bear that she brings out with her too. A lot of fun. Really difficult painting white on white. Used a lot of grays, a lot of that contrast paint gray, and then went back through and highlighted that with some off-white or some kind of dry brushed white back up through the gray there. And we have the group of psychers. I believe I went through and kind of individually showed all of them. More mercenaries for that game. And here we have Holiday Hellboy. This is a resin miniature that they put out as kind of a promotional item. Of course, Hellboy in a Santa Claus suit. I didn't show it here, but I actually magnetized him to that base so I could pull him off and put him on a clear base and use him in scenarios or some other kind of fun way. I also got the Hellboy expansion, and I've been working on painting that. So we got Hellboy Last King of England, and the Crooked Man, and some various monsters that I've painted through. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun painting Hellboy. I am not finished with it. I've got a ways to go. I think I also painted this. This was a 3D printed kit. This is a Baba Yaga house, and I've actually got the legs magnetically attached to the house. So I can lay the house down and it's a little hut if I want, or I can throw those legs on it and it could be a Baba Yaga house. And of course it's got a fully detailed interior also. Yeah, it's a lot of fun, that one. Now we're getting into my last couple of things. These were Christmas gifts that I got for my D&D loving friends. And this is of course an owlbear. This is a 3D print that I got from Etsy. And it's way cool. And I've got this, I guess the last thing we'll end on here is the wood elf on a dire squirrel, I believe is what it was called. And it does, yeah. And it was a lot of fun to paint. Yeah, this is another one. These both came fully assembled and everything, so I just had to paint them fully assembled. Sometimes it's a little tricky, especially when there's layers of things. A lot of contrast paint and a mixture of a few other of my old school techniques that I use to paint these up. And that's all I have to show for last year's effort. I've had a few ideas about maybe doing sort of a weekly show when I really get my painting going again. I haven't painted much of anything this year, but hopefully I'll be going again soon and getting some paintings done. And I thought about maybe doing a weekly show. I'm inspired by the Gorilla Miniatures guy who did this on the table thing where he shows like his weekly projects. I thought about doing that, but maybe once a month. And I'll show what I've worked on that month. If you like something like that, be sure to let me know. Hit like if you like this video. Let me know in the comments down below what you're interested in seeing more of. I've got more Ankh to paint, more D.E.I to paint. I've got the rest of Hellboy to paint. I'd love to finish that whole thing up and show all the expansions all painted up. I think that would be fun. Got a lot more to do this year. But until next time, enjoy your games, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.